Hi there, this is Lisa, and you're watching The Backward Glance. And today's video is going to be totally different for me. I thought it would be kind of fun to sort of talk about some of the things that are maybe common stressors for people who resell online, and tell you things like tips and tricks that I've come up with that help me sort of minimize the stress involved with these things. So I'm going to share with you like the headings that I'm going to be talking about. That way you can feel free to skip around if you want. So I'm going to talk about scams, non-paying buyers, shipping, flawed items, and death piles. I'm going to be talking about pricing your items, going over some sort of miscellaneous things that maybe are just generally discouraging to resellers, and some things that are basically lifestyle changes that you might not expect when you first get into reselling. And then at the end, I'm going to talk about a couple of things that kind of still stress me out that I haven't necessarily come up with a technique to deal with um, very readily. So I love reselling. I love my job. I get excited about it and I'm excited to do it. But there is a little bit of stress involved with it, just like any job. And for me, it's a lot less than the stress that I felt when I was out working for other people. So I'm going to try not to ramble too much in this video. We'll see how that goes. And I do totally welcome feedback, advice, comments, whatever, questions. So go ahead and feel free to leave a comment down below if you have some tips and tricks of your own or some stressors that maybe I haven't mentioned that you're having trouble dealing with. So I wanted to start with scams because I feel like it's a worry for people who are thinking about selling or new sellers, and it's actually something that maybe keeps people from signing up to sell at all. And the main thing here is if you are on social media, whether it's YouTube or you're on Facebook pages dealing with reselling, you're going to hear about scams. And what you're not going to hear about is the thousands of transactions that go off without a hitch that sellers have every day. So I have resold on and off since 2000, but my recent kind of stretch of reselling has lasted about a year and a half now, and in that time I've had well over 1,000 sales, and I have only had two items where I kind of feel like I had to do a return that maybe wasn't completely justified, and I wouldn't even say that those buyers were trying to scam me. So I would say that I've had no scams in over 1,000 sales, and I've had just a couple returns that I didn't really feel like fighting, is basically what happened, and I just kind of like took it as part of business. So just know that when you hear about those scams, it's such a small percentage of the time. However, it's really good to know what is going to attract scammers so that you can kind of avoid that. So first of all, starting with zero feedback can attract scammers because they know that you don't have experience. So my advice is that if you're thinking about selling on eBay and you have a brand new account with zero feedback, go ahead and make some purchases of small items so that you can at least get just a little bit of feedback going. And if you are seriously thinking about selling on eBay, you're going to need some supplies like a shipping scale, like some poly mailers. So just go ahead and make some purchases, let that feedback come in. If you don't get feedback right away, leave feedback for the seller when you get the item, and then usually that will prompt them to leave you feedback. The other thing is to start with selling items that are not that expensive. So if you're a brand new seller selling $500 items, that's going to attract a little bit more of a likelihood of a scammer than if you're selling items that are like 15 to 30 bucks. And if you did happen to get scammed on one of those $15 to $30 items, that kind of money is not probably going to, like shut down your whole business. So my advice, basically start small, uh, trust your buyers for the most part, don't just expect people to be scamming you, and then, get some feedback under your belt. And be aware of certain scams that are common. So one thing would be if you start getting best offers that are higher than your actual asking price. So if you have something listed at $100 or best offer and someone offers you $150, sometimes that's a scam. It's not always, because sometimes people just don't understand how eBay works. But I would definitely be aware. Usually that will be coupled with the buyer sending you a message saying, I really want to buy your item and I'll pay 150, but I need you to text me or I need you to call me right away. I'm not really sure what the outcome of that scam is for the buyer, and it's never happened to me personally. It's just one that I've heard about on social media. So, people asking you to contact them outside of eBay, first of all, is an eBay no no, and second of all, likely a scam. So, I would just ignore it if it happened to me, to be honest. Um, yeah, that's the big one, I think, is people wanting to pay more for your item and asking you to contact them off eBay. So now let's get into non-paying buyers. This should not be as much of a stress as I think it is for people. I think people just get really annoyed by it. Sorry, just adjusting here. Um, People get really annoyed by it, and it's totally normal, and it's just part of doing business. But the reason that you get non-paying buyers in the first place is it's tied to using best offer, offers to watchers, and it's tied to auctions. So what you want to make sure is that if you're using those features, you know that you're going to have some non-paying buyers. And if you are really, really stressed out by having non-paying buyers, don't use those features. So best offer is a great feature. I used to use it all the time. It totally helps sell your items. But sometimes people aren't going to pay. It's just part of it. So if you don't want to use best offer, you need to make sure that you're pricing really competitively. I'm not saying you have to be the lowest priced thing on there, but just that you're being reasonable with your prices. You are pricing your items to sell. And in that case, you might not need to use best offer and you might not need to use offers to watchers or auctions. So just be aware that using those things can result in some non-paying buyers. I also recommend turning on your unpaid item assistant. That is basically going to automatically open a case against a non-paying buyer in a time frame that you specify. So you have to give it at least 48 hours. So that's what I do. After about 24 hours of not getting paid, I send a payment reminder. eBay already has it all worded for you. All you have to do is like send it out, and they get this little message, just reminding them that they haven't paid for the item. And then after 48 hours, the unpaid item assistant opens a case. They still have 4 days to pay for their item, after which eBay closes the case. You get refunded on your fees, and you can go ahead and relist the item. So, worst case scenario, an item is out of your inventory for 6 days. Yes, it would be great to have sold that item to somebody else in that 6 days, but that doesn't mean you would have. So, just be patient with buyers. And also, sometimes you'll have buyers who want to pay you later and they'll actually send a message saying, like, can I buy this? Or usually they'll just buy it and then they'll be like, I'm going to pay for it next week. And that's up to you whether you want to allow that or not. And I've found that usually buyers do come through, buyers who tell me like a specific day that they're going to pay. In general, they do come through and pay for it, but it's totally up to you whether you want to allow for that or not. Um, Yeah. So let's get into shipping, which is, I think, actually probably one of the most stressful things. And I'm primarily a clothing reseller, but I used to sell a lot of hard goods. And I recommend really for new sellers to start with things that are very easy to ship. And clothing is easy to ship, and that's why I still love selling clothing. But it doesn't have to be clothing, but like books or things that are small, they're not oddly shaped, they're not super breakable, until you get some experience with shipping under your belt. So, my first few tips on this are to charge for shipping, especially to start out with. If you're selling items that there are 100 other of the exact same item on eBay and everybody is doing free shipping, then you might have to do free shipping on the item to be competitive. But if you're selling items where maybe there's only 3 or 4 other ones, who cares if they're doing free shipping? Just price your item competitively and charge for shipping. Um, the other thing is get a scale right away. It's something that I think people try and estimate and they think like it's okay if they lose a little here and there, but in my experience, I'm a bad estimator. So I started out estimating and I realized very quickly that I was consistently losing money on shipping. So I recommend picking up a scale, order it through eBay. You'll get some feedback. They are not expensive. My scale will weigh up to 50 pounds. It was like 20 bucks. I haven't even had to change the batteries yet in like a year and a half. So, really great investment and it'll pay for itself right away. The next thing I would do is go to USPS.com and create an account there and order a selection of their free boxes. So you can get their poly mailers, which are a flat rate, and then they also have like a small, medium, and flat rate, uh, small, medium, and large flat rate boxes. And then they have a selection of other boxes that are not flat rate. You'll just have to pay by the weight of the item that goes in. They have regional rate boxes, so regional A and B, and there's like different shapes of those. So what I would do is order, especially if you know that you're going to sell a variety of different items, like different sizes, order one package of 10 of each size box. And then what I would do is actually assemble one of each size box so that when you're listing, you have those and you can like literally put the item in and see which package that it's going to best fit in before you fill out your whole shipping section on eBay. So, tied in with that is my biggest thing with shipping is never ever list an item that you don't know how you're going to package. And I cannot tell you how many times years ago when I was selling hard goods on Etsy, I felt like I had a zillion boxes around. I lived in a town where all the shops would put out like a bunch of boxes and I would just go pick them up and they'd sometimes have bubble wrap in them and stuff like that. And I felt like, well, if I have a zillion boxes, there's absolutely no way that I don't have a box that's going to fit, this thing that I sold. And then somehow the thing that I would sell was just like a little too big for my small boxes and ridiculously small for my big boxes. And what can happen is you end up compromising. Either you create a box that looks bad because you're in a hurry, or you put it in something that doesn't really protect it the way that it should. So that's what you want to avoid. So get a box for the item. I used to actually mark inside one of the flaps of the box what item it was for, and I would not use that for another item. I'd have to have a box on hand for each item that I was going to send, and that reduced all of that stress of like trying to package something that I wanted to get it to the post office that day, and I didn't have time to go around buying or searching for more boxes. So I really recommend knowing exactly how you're going to pack something. The other thing would be overpack your breakable items, especially if you're new to shipping breakables. If you package an item that's breakable and you think, I wonder if this is going to get there okay, or I think this won't get there okay, I think it'll probably get there okay, it probably needs more packaging. Anything can happen to your packages, so you should be confident that your package will arrive safely, you know, except for maybe like if it got set on fire. But like anything else, you should be confident that it will arrive safely. And even if you're using priority mail, which has insurance on it, just know that they are going to gauge the packaging that you used when you make your insurance claim. I've never had to make an insurance claim, but I'm a little bit familiar with how it works. So if you throw a little bit of newspaper around something and send it off in a priority mail box and they damage it, they're not going to cover that because they're going to say that you didn't package it well enough, and they'd be right. So, just as a personal story, the very first item that I sold on eBay back in 2000 was 4 little depression glass, like sherbet cups, and every one of them arrived broken, and I totally did not package them well, and I had never really sent anything breakable through the mail. And that was a real learning experience for me. So now I'm super diligent about packing things that are breakable. And also, I don't sell a lot of things that are breakable. To me, it has to be worth a lot of money for me to spend the time to package it because it just takes a long time. So, um, the last tip I have about shipping is to enroll in the global shipping program. There's a lot of stress around international shipping. However, eBay, the algorithm is said to boost your listings if they have if they're available for people in other countries to purchase, and that makes sense. So I don't want my listings sitting at the bottom of a page because I'm not offering international shipping, but I also personally don't want to deal with all the customs stuff involved in international shipping. So if you're not aware of the global shipping program, essentially you send the package to eBay's headquarters in Kentucky where they will repackage it and then ship it to your customer, and they deal with all the customs forms. They also, because they're repacking it, they are responsible if it breaks in transit, so you don't have to worry about refunding like a huge sale and a huge amount of shipping if something did happen to the item while it was in transit. So, to be honest, you probably won't get a ton of international sales unless you're selling things that are really rare. I get like a couple a month tops, but I still feel like I get that boost in the algorithm because my items are available to sell internationally. So, and every once in a while I'll have like a spurt where I'll sell quite a few things through that global shipping program. It's very expensive for the buyer, but to me it's better than not offering any kind of international shipping. So next I want to talk about two items that kind of go together, flawed items and death piles. So first of all, every single reseller accidentally buys flawed items. I don't care who you are, it is going to happen to you, and you cannot let it stress you out that bad. So first of all, you just need a quality control system in place. So for me, I usually shop at thrift stores for my sourcing. And when I am ready to buy, when I first look at an item, I'll kind of scan it and I'll throw it in my cart. And then before I check out, I will take it to the brightest place that I can find in the thrift store and I will look it over really carefully. I will zip zippers, I will button buttons and snap snaps, roll up cuffs, pop up collars to look for those collar stains, And if you're buying hard goods, do the same thing. Obviously, you're looking for different flaws, but do a good check because I will sometimes narrow down like half of the items in my cart just right there in the thrift store. The next thing I do is that I bring them home and I get right in front of my window. I have great natural light during the day and I do another check. And the third check that I do is when I'm listing. So I will lint brush every item, even if it's not really linty, and that basically takes me like inch by inch over the item. So I'm very unlikely to miss a flaw. Sometimes I put an item on my mannequin and that will, stretch the seams out and I'll be able to see if maybe there's a little hole in a seam or something like that. So do several quality control checks before your item goes live on eBay. So the biggest stress in my mind that would come with a flawed item is to sell an item and then realize that it has a flaw. And when I used to sell hard goods on Etsy, I didn't really prepackage them at all, and this would happen to me periodically where I'd pull it out to ship it and my eye would be like more critical at that time and I would suddenly realize that I had sold something with a flaw on it. And then I'd have to contact the buyer and I'd be upset and they might be upset and I'd worry about feedback issues. So my way around this is that after I list something, I put it away and I don't look at it when I send it. And some people might disagree with this, but I do a lot of quality control before I list it. And then if it's clothing, it's into a poly bag, into a bin. If it's shoes, I wrap them up. I put them in a 2-gallon bag. I store my shoes in a box, so I do take them out, but I don't really like unwrap them and relook at them. And for me, that has honestly just reduced a lot of stress. And I haven't had a lot of issues. I've had maybe 3 times where a buyer said that something I sent them had a flaw. Like one was just a little hole. One was the pair of shoes that I think I referenced earlier where they said it was 2 different sizes. I don't really know if that's true. Um, at any rate, it's very rare for me to find out that I shipped something with a flaw, and it was an everyday stress for me to take things out and be like folding them up and then like my eye just constantly looking for some kind of flaw that I missed. So that's my advice on that. The other thing is know if your thrift stores have a return policy. A lot of Goodwills have a return policy, and I'm super lucky. Mine does. The closest one to me does. There's another one I go to that doesn't, so I know it's not like a nationwide thing. It goes by district. But if you have a Goodwill or Salvation Army, whatever, that has a return policy, get your items home, look them over, don't let them sit because the policy is probably a window of time. Mine is a week, and get them listed within that week. That way, if you find a flaw, or even if you just buy something that you realize wasn't as valuable as you thought, just return it. So just know that sometimes that's an option if you weren't aware of it. Um, be realistic about your willingness to fix things. So, if you find a flaw in the thrift store, like an item is missing a button or something, are you really going to fix it? And some of the things that get me are items that need a lot of sweater shaving, and I have a great sweater shaver. But that item better be worth the time that it's going to take me. It's not a bread and butter item thing. It's for something that's better than that. It's for a sweater that I'm going to sell for 40 or 50 bucks, not a 15 to $20 one, right? Um, the other thing is things that have a lot of animal hair on them, especially like sometimes I find wool that has like dog hair, but then it also has like the little hairs that are in the wool, and I can spend way too much time on that stuff. So make sure that the flaws are worth it to fix and be super honest with yourself about whether you're going to take the time to do that, because otherwise it's going to become a death pile, and that's what you don't want. Um, the other thing about flaws is people will buy stuff with flaws. I sell stuff with flaws all the time. I take really good pictures. I mention several times in my listing that it has a flaw, and it has never become an issue. So don't think that because something is stained or missing a button or whatever, that nobody is going to buy it. Just be really honest. And obviously, you're not going to get top dollar for it, but you should absolutely be able to recoup the cost that you put into it and even make a little tiny bit of profit on it. And that way you don't have to be like heartbroken that you come home and something had a flaw that you didn't realize. And concerning death piles, I like to list things basically in the order that I purchase. Of course, some things get set aside for laundry and things like that, but essentially, don't just like list your favorite items and then leave things, because that's when it starts to get out of hand. And the other thing that I do is I have a limit of 10 items set aside. And the other way you could do it is like amount of time set aside. So if I have 10 items that have like some little fix or a stain treatment or whatever, when it hits 10, that's the day that I have to deal with them. And I'm not going to list anything else until I deal with those items. And I just had one of those days, which is really good. So um, those items are going to take longer. It's going to take me probably all day to get through them. But to me, I honestly think that I would probably be a hoarder. Like, I think I have the tendency just a little bit, and that's why I need to resell. So I can't let it get to like I have a pile. I also live in a very small place, so I don't have a room I can shove things in. And if you do, that's kind of dangerous. So you have to be self-motivated to stay on top of that stuff. Um, Pricing is something that I don't really find stressful, but I just wanted to mention that I have seen on some forums that people will get like a pretty ordinary average item. Sorry, I'm gonna shift here a little bit. And they'll spend a long time researching it. And you're gonna burn out so fast if you do that. So the thing I wanted to say about that is you don't have to find the exact item. Now, if you have something and you suspect that that item is worth a lot of money, it's probably worth your time to really research it pretty hard. However, if you're buying like staple items that are probably worth 15 to 30 bucks, you shouldn't be spending more than like 5 minutes tops researching those items, because it's just too much time to be putting in for the payback that you're going to get. So if you're buying clothing and you have a brand and you can't, you have a sweater, just look at sweaters in the same brand or even long sleeve shirts or whatever, but don't feel like you have to find that exact item, because you will, like I said, you will burn out so quickly. You can always lower your prices. You can't raise them after they sold. So, if you're not sure because you couldn't find the same item, use some common sense, put a price on it, and move on. And then go back and lower it later if you don't really get any interest. The other thing that I hear people say a lot is like, this sold fast, so I probably priced it too low. And I don't know, I feel like you can't really second guess yourself on that. In the future, if you found the same item, you could try just a little bit higher of a price, but just be happy that it sold, and honestly, maybe you priced it just right. So that's something to think about. And the last tip that I have on pricing is do not be afraid to use your phone when you're sourcing. I remember when I started, I felt awkward about using my phone in the thrift store, or I had this feeling like if I use my phone, everyone's going to know I'm a reseller, and that's bad. But here's the thing, if you're frequenting your thrift stores the way that you will end up frequenting them if you sell full time, they're going to know right away that you're a reseller, and that's not a bad thing. And sometimes it can even open opportunities to you for people to know that you're a reseller. So rather than buying bad items, look up comps while you're in the store. And I look up comps constantly, even for things that I've sold before, because I might not have sold the same style. Or maybe it's been a few months since I sold this certain brand, and I don't know if it's still doing that well. Things change really quickly. So use use your phone ahead of time, look up comps ahead of time as much as possible, especially if you don't have a return policy at your thrift store, so that you're not making bad purchases, and that is going to help you out a lot. So the next category that I have are just some things that were sort of miscellaneous that might be generally discouraging, which is a kind of stress, right? So number one thing is, don't compare yourself to other sellers, especially, I assume that if you're watching this video that you're learning a lot on YouTube and you're watching a lot of sellers who, they might have been doing this for years. They might live in an area where they can constantly source really high-end stuff. They might be selling on many different platforms. They are probably not showing you every single bad item that they sell or pick, or the items, they're not, showing you the items they redonate because they had flaws on them or things like that. So, you know, it's super helpful to learn from YouTube, but you just have to do the best you can and find a stride that works for you. And don't be comparing your sales to theirs. Don't be comparing your pictures to theirs. Anything like that. Learn what you can, but take it with a grain of salt. The other thing, like talking about pictures, is that you have to release a little bit of perfectionism, especially if you want to be listing a lot, because perfectionism can eat up a lot of time, and it can eat up a lot of money if you feel like you have to go and buy like the best lighting system and stuff like that. So people are always asking how other sellers get these perfect white background pictures. You don't have to aim for a perfect white background picture. Your buyer needs to be able to see your item and see what they're buying, and your description needs to be pretty good so that they're not surprised when they get it, and you don't really have to aim for better than that. Now, in time, you might want to take steps to improve your pictures, but look at sold listings on eBay and you will see some terrible, terrible pictures and terrible descriptions where the item's still sold. So, you want to be better than terrible for sure, but my pictures are mediocre at best. Sometimes they're great because sometimes the lighting is great and sometimes the lighting is bad, but I need to get some work done, and I just go with it. And as long as I feel like the buyer can see what they're getting, I'm okay with that. So try and release a little bit of that perfectionism. The other thing is, everything about this business is a skill that takes practice, and you'll get better at it. So I know when I first started, I would spend like all day doing like 5 or 6 listings, and I couldn't imagine being at the point that other people talk about where they're like, I did 40 listings today. And I still don't do that many in a day, but I can knock out like 10 or 15 listings in a morning and then have the rest of the day to do what I want. And I never imagined when I started that I would just get that fast, and it just happens slowly, and all of a sudden you realize that you're much more efficient at it. And you'll get better at sourcing, you'll get better at checking for flaws. So if you're going out and you're just not finding that much, or you keep making bad buys, it's like learning an instrument. You just have to sit there and do it over and over and over, and then it starts to click and you start to get better. So just don't get down on yourself about that. Um, The other thing is, ups and downs of eBay can get discouraging. The downs obviously get discouraging. So make sure that when you're having good sales, you're putting away money, and make sure no matter what, you're putting away money for your taxes. So especially if you're new, that doesn't hit you like a ton of bricks in April of next year. And yeah, when sales are good, put away money, because sales get bad, and it happens to everybody. People with 10,000 items can still have days when they're not really selling anything, and maybe a few days in a row. So people talk about the summer slowdown, and right now that's in effect. And just think of it as an opportunity when you're slow to build your inventory. So it's great to be selling like as much as you're listing, but when you can actually build the inventory and it sits there, that's residual income for you. So in quarter four, when maybe you're selling more than you're even sourcing, you have that residual income sitting there waiting to make you money. And it's also great because what if you get sick and you can't really be listing, or you want to take a little vacation and you can't really be listing? You need those items that didn't sell so quick sitting in your store and waiting to make you money. Um, just this is kind of drawing to a close, so I wanted to mention, if you have never worked for yourself before and you're used to working for other people, a couple just little like lifestyle things. Number one is you have to be self-motivated, and I hear a lot of people say like anyone can sell on eBay. It's really easy to sell on eBay. That's not really true. To be successful selling on eBay, you have to know how to be your own boss, and yeah, that takes some learning and you can get better at it, and I'm not saying that, if you've never done it, you can't do it. That's totally not true, but definitely expect that you're going to have to like set routines for yourself and be strict with yourself and sometimes motivate yourself when it's really hard. You also want to make sure, the work-life balance thing is to give yourself some time off daily. If you haven't worked from home, it can be hard to find that balance. So like one thing I like to do is turn off my phone at certain times. Like I like to get up in the morning and have some coffee and just like have my mind be blank. And I found that when I started my business, the first thing I would do was like check my eBay, and then all of a sudden I'd just be thinking about work. And so you need some times where you step away from it and you don't even allow yourself to like go do work, so that you can really find that balance. And the other thing that's different for me personally about eBay is that I'm used to having jobs where I'm at least on my feet all day, if not like very active. And eBay is not that active of a job. So if you need to get out and move around, come up with some kind of exercise regime, get out in the sunlight and get out and be social, because the other thing about eBay is you're not always going to have the kind of social experience you would have working with other people, presumably, if that's the kind of job that you had before. Um, so I mentioned that I had like a couple things that still stress me out about eBay. So I thought I'd mention those here at the end. And the first one is what I call message anxiety. So I don't know if other resellers can relate to this, but I still get a little bit of anxiety every time I get a message. And it's ridiculous because 95% of messages are neutral or good. Like sometimes people literally message me to say, "Thank you for the item, I really liked it." And lots of times it's either an offer coming through, maybe I wasn't accepting best offer, but somebody's messaging me an offer. And other times it's just a question about the item. But I always have this moment of like, what did I do? What's going to be wrong? And it's so rare that I get a message where something was wrong. And when I do, it's like, okay, just deal with that. It's part of business. I'm always saying it's part of business. But I don't know if anyone can identify with that. So, message anxiety, I haven't totally figured out how to get over that. The other thing is that, and this again comes down to, it's just part of business and it's those ups and downs, but I wish that I could keep my mood from being connected to my sales. When I wake up and I've got a bunch of sales, or maybe I sell something that's like one of the higher priced items in my store, it's easy to be like, I'm in a great mood today. And then sometimes I have hit a wall where I will have like couple weeks of bad sales, and I feel like I'm actually going into one of those right now. I don't know, it's too soon to tell, but my sales have been down the last few days, and I've been doing a lot of listing and not seeing the results of that, and that can quickly kind of make me just a little bit crabby, and I don't want my mood to be affected by eBay, because I love it. Overall, I love it, and when I've worked jobs in the past where I was working for other people, like I worked at a grocery store, and it was never like, oh, we sold so many groceries today. What a great day. Or, the store was really quiet. I'm just kind of bummed. So maybe somebody has a tip on dealing with that. I mean, psychologically, I know it's like it's part of the business, but it is a little bit hard when it's your livelihood and you get excited about it and then you hit those bad times to not just kind of let it bum you out a little bit, but you just have to keep going. So that's all that I wanted to share. Hopefully this wasn't too long, and I appreciate you watching till the end if you made it this far. Thanks a lot. Bye.